Guys, I really don't want to talk about this one. My hat's a little crooked. Not so much for the reasons that I typically don't want to talk about one of these episodes, but because, well, I guess we'll get to that in a minute. This is my review of Maximum Capacity, which starts out like pretty much any other episode of Steven Universe. It would seem that Greg's storage shed is full. It has reached maximum capacity. And we get some decent comedy here when Steven says that he knows exactly who can help them clean and organize the storage shed. And all of you who haven't seen this episode are going to say, oh, well, obviously the answer is Pearl. Apparently it's not. Apparently the answer is Amethyst. Because that's who you want organizing your stuff. A hoarder. And there's more comedy when Steven lays out 3 boxes for them to sort junk into. One that says keep, one that says sell, and one that says burn. You know, I really like this kid's style. But as they actually get to cleaning and organizing, it becomes pretty clear pretty fast that Amethyst isn't really interested in doing any cleaning or organizing because she's a hoarder. And also because she finds these old tapes of this show called Little Butler, which is this really hilarious send-up to old cheese-filled 80s sitcoms that I guess she and Greg used to watch a lot at some undisclosed point in the past. I'm assuming it's after Rose died/turned into Steven, because there are some implications later that seem to suggest that this could not have been something that happened when Rose was still around. But Amethyst wants to start watching this show again with Greg, and it starts eating up time. And you kind of get the sense that, oh no, something bad is going to happen because of this, but because it's been mostly a comedy episode so far, you are in no way prepared for what is actually going to happen later on in this episode, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So anyway, we get a scene where we learn that the New Year's fireworks are that night. I guess in this version of the world, they celebrate New Year's by setting off fireworks at midnight, which is a pretty cool tradition, I'll admit. Maybe something that people actually do in the real world. If it is, I just don't know about it. But anyway, I guess that Steven and his dad go every single year to this, and they always kind of do the same thing. They've got their own little traditions. So he's really looking forward to going with his dad after he takes his dad breakfast, and then they finish cleaning up the storage shed. And it looks like his dad is already up, and he and Amethyst are already watching the show again. But then he says something that makes me want to call bullshit on this episode. He tells Steven that he's been up all night watching this show, and nope, sorry, Greg is clearly in his mid to late 40s at this point in the show, and I'm in my mid to late 20s, and I can't stay up all night watching television without looking like a sack of crap in the morning. There is no way this man did not get any sleep. Suspension of disbelief shattered. No, all joking aside, it's pretty clear that Greg has lost track of time, and that is in part because of Amethyst, because she's been pressuring him to continue watching this show with her. But either way, Greg seems to realize that he's not actually getting anything done and that he needs to kind of step up his game, and he reassures Steven that he will be there for the fireworks that night. But he's not. Pearl and Garnet are there, but Greg and Amethyst are absent. And after a little bit more cutesy comedy-esque stuff, we kind of get confirmation of some of the suspicions that I think the majority of viewers have been having at this point, that this isn't the first time that this has happened, that Greg and Amethyst used to lose days and days watching this show at some point in the past. Pearl and Garnet basically confirm that for us. And at this point, there are some implications boiling in the back of your mind. A burning question that you're asking yourself. Is it possible that Amethyst has a thing for Greg? That she has feelings for Greg? And I think the answer is yes. I think she had feelings for Greg when Rose was still around. And then after Rose was gone, she tried to do something about it, but at the same time, she blamed Greg for Rose not being there anymore. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Because after the fireworks are over, when Steven goes back to the garage to try to find out what's going on with his dad, why he didn't show up, he witnesses something that he was never intended to see. No, it's not that. Get your head out of the gutter. No, what happens is Greg realizes that the fireworks are going on. I guess there are still some going off in the distance. And he wants to run and try to, I guess, catch the trailing end of the fireworks with Steven and make up for not having been there for the whole thing. But Amethyst physically tries to stop him. And she even goes so far as to turn into Steven. And it clearly makes Greg very uncomfortable because it's already been established that he doesn't like shape-shifting. And this is the episode where we find out why. But she turns into Steven to kind of pantomime what she thinks his reaction to the whole thing will be, to try to put Greg at ease. But Greg's having none of it. He insists that he needs to be with his son. And Amethyst just goes off on him. She says, I used to have someone who was there for me too until she started spending time with you. and she's really, really violent about it. And at this point, it's very, very obvious that she resents Greg for Rose not being there, that there is some blame being placed here. More than I think even Pearl feels towards Greg. The way Amethyst sees it, Rose was basically her mom. And then Greg came along, and as a result of their relationship, Rose isn't there anymore. As a result of Rose and Greg's relationship, Amethyst is now without a mother. And to be perfectly honest, I can understand why she's upset. That's a pretty big deal. But it's not Greg's fault. It's Rose's fault. And fault isn't even the right word. Rose made a choice, and she had every right to make it. It's her life. And then Amethyst does the unthinkable. She shapeshifts into Rose. Now, granted, she doesn't know Steven's there to be traumatized by this, but Rose has been dead for, 13 years? That's not a very long time. Greg, I'm sure, is still emotionally traumatized by what happened to her. Even if he knew ahead of time what giving birth to Steven would do to Rose, there is no way you could be prepared for something like that. And now Amethyst is callously taking Rose's form and pretending to be Rose. And this is where we get, I think, confirmation that Amethyst has feelings for Greg. Because she is attempting to use Rose's form, a form that she knows that Greg finds appealing, to entice Greg to stay with her. And the implications of that are just so far-reaching that I don't even want to think about it. What this basically means is that Amethyst is emotionally abusive and emotionally manipulative. And now, thankfully, once Steven makes himself known, she seems immediately regretful that she was doing this, but that doesn't really make up for it. So after Steven gulps down a healthy dose of pretending like he didn't just see what he saw, and Amethyst runs off, Steven proves that he is the toughest kid ever and returns to the garage the following day to help Greg finish cleaning out the garage. Again, I'm going to call bullshit, this time not so jokingly. That experience had to be traumatic for Steven. I just can't buy him going back there the very next day. Maybe a few days later, after he's had some time to think about it, but not the very next day, unless Steven's been traumatized like this before, and that's something I just don't want to think about. Anyway, he and Greg get to the garage, and the gems are already there. Pearl has organized everything. There's a small box of stuff that is, I guess, essential to Greg that they're going to keep in the garage, but the rest of it, Amethyst is going to helpfully store in her room in the temple. And yes, she seems very remorseful for what she's done. She definitely seems like she wants to make it up to Greg, but cleaning out someone's garage does not make up for emotionally tormenting them. And as much as I hate the implications that this episode brought up, they really need to revisit this in the future and actually resolve this. They actually need to give Amethyst and Greg a chance to resolve whatever this is. And I really hope they do, and I'm probably going to hate talking about that episode too, to be perfectly honest. Not because this episode's bad. Not because I have any problem with the actual structure of the episode. This kind of behavior is technically realistic. I can totally buy that all of the stuff that Amethyst has been through, all the trauma that she has experienced, would cause her to lash out and inflict some of that trauma back on other people. There was a really satisfying mood whiplash in there where the episode went from comedic to just kind of ominous to being just full of dread, just dripping with it. That really helped land exactly how big a deal this actually was. And I think it brought up some really interesting questions about the characters and introduced some really interesting implications that not only make the characters more flawed and interesting and human, for lack of a better term in Amethyst's case, but open up some really interesting story possibilities going forward. I just don't like seeing Amethyst this way. It's kind of like finding out that one of your best friends likes to step on frogs. It's just not something you ever want to know about somebody. I never wanted to know that Amethyst has a history of emotionally tormenting people. That's just not something I wanted to know about her. But, like I said, from a structural perspective, I can't fault this episode. It's actually really good. All of that said, guys, if you have seen this episode, what did you think about it? Let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.